May 2nd, 1945. A cellar on the outskirts of Berlin. The air is a thick, choking cocktail of cordite, dust, and damp earth. Above, the world is ending in a symphony of steel, the relentless, grinding bass of Soviet T-34 tank treads and the percussive screams of Katyusha rockets. 20-year-old Anneliese Vogel, a Nachrichtenhelferin with the Ninth Army, hunches over her Siemens Hellschreiben, her fingers stiff with cold and fear. The machine's chatter is the only familiar sound left in her universe. It is her job to listen, to transcribe, to connect the dying fragments of the Reich. But the ether is growing quiet. The voices she once knew, stern, confident, barking orders, have been replaced by static, screams, and then silence. A persistent, dry cough rattles her thin frame, a small, personal betrayal amidst the grand collapse. It started a week ago, a tickle in her throat. Now it feels like swallowing gravel. Her headset crackles. A voice, frantic and young, breaks through the noise. Command post at Halbe is overrun. Repeat, Halbe is overrun. We are falling back to the Spree. Is anyone? The transmission cuts out, severed by an explosion that makes the wine bottles on a nearby rack tremble. Anneliese rips the paper strip from the teleprinter. The message is incomplete, a ghost of a sentence. It doesn't matter. There is no one to give it to. Oberleutnant Richter, her commanding officer, has been dead for 2 days, his body lying under a collapsed beam in the next room. She and 3 other women are all that remain of their signals unit. One, a girl named Lotta with wide, terrified eyes, is rocking back and forth in the corner, humming a children's song. The sound is more unnerving than the artillery. A tremor runs through the ground, deeper this time. Dust sifts from the ceiling, powdering Anneliese's blonde hair, turning it prematurely gray. You can feel it in your teeth, the vibration of an army arriving not just at the city's edge, but at the end of your life as you know it. Her stomach clenches, a familiar knot of hunger that has been her constant companion for months. The last of the hard bread was eaten yesterday. Now there is only the metallic taste of fear. The cough comes again, harder this time, a deep, barking sound that echoes in the small space. It leaves her breathless, leaning against the damp stone wall. Lotta stops humming and stares at her. "You're sick, Anneliese," she whispers, her voice a child's. "You sound like my grandfather did, before he died." The words hang in the air, more chilling than the cellar's damp. Sickness was a luxury no one could afford. A wound you could understand. A wound was heroic. But a fever, a cough, a weakness in the limbs, that was just failure. It was your body giving up before the fight was truly over. Suddenly, the cellar door groans, then shatters inward in a spray of splintered wood. Silhouetted against the gray, smoky light are 2 figures, broad-shouldered, carrying rifles with round magazines. Soviet soldiers. Their faces are grim, smeared with dirt and exhaustion. One of them barks a command in Russian. Anneliese doesn't understand the words, but the meaning is clear, in the sharp, impatient gesture of his PPSH-41 submachine gun. Out. Now. Hands up. She rises slowly, her legs unsteady. The sudden movement triggers another coughing fit, a spasm that bends her double. She presses a hand to her chest, trying to stifle the sound, as if it were a state secret. One of the soldiers nudges her roughly with his rifle barrel. He says something to his comrade, and though she doesn't know the language, the tone is universal. Disgust, dismissal. He sees a defeated soldier of a broken army. He does not see the fever beginning to prickle her skin, or the ache settling deep into her bones. He cannot feel the chill that has nothing to do with the cellar and everything to do with the unseen enemy now multiplying inside her. As she is herded up the stairs and into the apocalyptic light of a burning Berlin, Anneliese Vogel understands a new, terrifying truth. The war of nations may be over for her, but a far more intimate war, a war for her own breath, has just begun. June 12, 1945. Camp Attachy, France. The journey had been a blur of cattle cars, barbed wire transit pens, and the indifferent faces of Allied soldiers. First, the Soviets, who had handed their female captives over to the Americans in a chaotic exchange on the banks of the Elbe, and now the Americans, whose efficiency felt just as dehumanizing as the brutality that preceded it. Anneliese stands shivering in a long, snaking line of women. The uniform she was captured in is gone, replaced by a shapeless gray dress made of rough, scratchy material. Her name is also gone, replaced by a number stamped in purple ink on a cardboard tag pinned to her chest, 73119. She is no longer Anneliese Vogel, Signals Auxiliary. She is a digit in a vast and complicated equation of defeat. The air smells of lye, boiled cabbage, and a pervasive, damp misery. The processing was swift and impersonal. They were stripped, their heads shaved to the scalp to prevent lice, a deep, searing humiliation that left many of the women weeping silently. A cold spray from a hose, a rough towel, the gray dress. Their few personal possessions, a photograph, a letter, a ribbon, were tossed into a crate. All that was left was the body, and Anneliese's body was failing her. The cough that began in the Berlin cellar is now her constant tormentor. It is a wet, productive thing that leaves her gasping for air and sends sharp pains through her ribs. At night, in the sprawling, crowded barracks, the sound joins a chorus of other coughs, moans, and quiet sobs. Barrack C, where she is housed with 200 other women, is a hothouse of sickness. They sleep on straw-filled palliasses packed so tightly together you can feel the feverish warmth of the woman next to you, smell the sour sweat of her illness. The food is a tasteless, watery soup and a dense, dark bread that tastes of sawdust. It is enough to keep you alive, but not enough to fight off the infection brewing in your lungs. Dysentery sweeps through the barracks in waves. Skin rashes, boils, and fungal infections bloom in the damp, unhygienic conditions. You see it in the listless eyes of the other women, the sallow skin, the slow, shuffling gait. They are all caught in a state of suspended animation, their bodies breaking down while they wait for a future that is completely out of their control. The camp infirmary is a single, overwhelmed tent run by a U.S. Army medic, a Corporal Miller, who looks barely older than Anneliese herself, and a handful of German nurses who are also prisoners. It is always full. To get inside, you have to be on the verge of collapse. Anneliese tries twice. The first time, she is turned away by a German nurse who tells her a cough is not an emergency. "Everyone has a cough, girl. Go back to your bunk." The second time, she waits for hours, feeling the fever rise and fall in dizzying waves, only to be seen by the American corporal. He doesn't speak German, she speaks no English. He shines a light in her eyes, presses a stethoscope to her back for a moment over her rough dress, and frowns. She tries to explain, pointing to her chest, mimicking the racking coughs that keep her awake all night. He doesn't understand. He hands her 2 white pills, aspirin, from a large brown bottle and gestures for the next woman in line. The dismissal is so complete, so utterly indifferent, it feels like a physical blow. She is invisible. Her suffering is a language he cannot or will not understand. That night, the fever takes hold. She drifts in a hallucinatory haze, the wooden beams of the barrack ceiling swirling above her. She is back in the cellar, the Hellschreiber chattering, but the words it types are nonsense, a prophecy of doom. Then she is home in Dresden, before the bombing, her mother humming in the kitchen. The smell of baking bread is so real she can almost taste it. She wakes with a start, drenched in sweat, the cough tearing at her throat. The woman in the next bunk, a stern-faced former Flakhelferin named Margareta, is leaning over her, a damp rag in her hand. She places it on Anneliese's forehead. The coolness is a small, shocking mercy. "You're burning up," Margareta says, her voice low. "The aspirin is useless. We have to do something more. If we don't, you won't last the week." Anneliese looks into the older women's weary eyes and sees not pity, but a grim, pragmatic fear. Anneliese's sickness is a threat to them all. In a place like this, a dying woman is not a tragedy. She is a contagion. The days bleed into one another, marked only by the shrill blast of the whistle for morning and evening roll call. For Annalise, they are a blurry ordeal of fever dreams and agonizing consciousness. She is too weak to stand for long, her legs trembling, her vision swimming. Marguerite, using her authority as a former non-commissioned officer, manages to get Annalise excused from work details, but it is a temporary reprieve. The camp administration views illness as a logistical problem, and those who cannot contribute are a drain on resources. Sickness has its own brutal economy. An extra ration of bread might be traded for a clean bandage. A whispered word to one of the German nurses in the infirmary might get you a few more aspirin. But real medicine, the powerful sulfa drugs and the near-mythical penicillin the Americans possessed, was a treasure beyond the reach of ordinary prisoners. It was reserved for the conquerors. Annalise lies on her straw mattress, which is now damp and sour from her sweat. The thin, threadbare blanket offers little warmth against the persistent chills that rack her body. The cough is a monster living in her chest, a relentless assault that leaves her muscles aching and her throat raw. Sometimes she coughs so hard that bright, coppery flecks appear on the rag she holds to her mouth. Each time it happens, a cold dread washes over her, a certainty that something inside her is tearing itself apart. The women of Barrack C watch her with a mixture of pity and fear. They offer what they can: a sip of water, a portion of their bread softened in soup, a hand to hold during the worst of the fever. But they are powerless. Their kindness is a flickering candle against a hurricane. One afternoon, a young French guard, no more than a boy, walks through the barracks on an inspection. He stops near Annalise's bunk, his nose wrinkled at the smell of sickness. Marguerite steps forward, her posture straight, her voice firm but respectful. "S'il vous plaît, monsieur," she begins, her French rusty but clear. She needs another blanket. She is very cold, very sick. The guard glances at Annalise's pale, sweating face and shrugs. "No," he says, his voice flat. He taps his rifle. "Regulations. 1 blanket per prisoner." Marguerite presses, her voice lowering, becoming more desperate. "Please, just for 1 night. Look at her." The guard's eyes harden. He is used to this, the constant requests, the begging. To him, it is a sign of weakness, the whining of the defeated. He barks an order to Marguerite to step back, then continues his patrol, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. The denial is a small, everyday cruelty, but it feels monumental. It is a confirmation of their status. They are not people with needs, but objects to be managed. Later that evening, Ilse, a woman who had been a high-ranking adjutant in the Luftwaffe, sits on the edge of Annalise's bunk. Ilse is respected and feared in equal measure. She is shrewd, speaks passable English, and understands how the camp's hidden systems of power work. She has watched Annalise fading for days. "Marguerite's way is useless," she says, her voice a low whisper. "You cannot ask a dog for a bone. You must go to the man who owns the kennel." She looks directly at Annalise, her gaze intense. "The American commandant, Captain Davies. I have seen him. He is a hard man, but he is not a fool. He fears an epidemic more than he hates us." Annalise can barely focus on her words. The idea of approaching the American commander feels impossible, a terrifying breach of the unwritten rules. "What could I say?" Annalise rasps, her voice a fragile thread. Ilse shakes her head. "You will not say anything. I will speak, but you must come with me. He needs to see you. He needs to see what will happen to us if this is allowed to spread." It is a desperate gamble. To approach the commandant outside of official channels could be seen as insubordination, an act of protest. It could result in punishment, a transfer to a worse camp, a reduction in rations for the entire barrack. The risk is enormous. But as another coughing fit seizes Annalise, shaking her so violently at the flimsy bunk frame groans, the alternative becomes starkly clear. To do nothing is to accept death. Ilse places a hand on Annalise's shoulder. She says, her voice leaving no room for argument, "We will go before him. We will not ask. We will beg." The next morning feels different. The usual gray light filtering through the barrack's grimy windows seems sharper, more accusatory. Ilse and Marguerite help Annalise to her feet. Her legs feel like water, and a wave of dizziness threatens to pull her under. They dress her, pulling the rough gray fabric over her skeletal frame. Every movement is an effort. Every breath is a battle. Marguerite has given Annalise her own shoes, as Annalise's had been worn through during the long march into captivity. It is a small sacrifice, but in this place, it is everything. Stand tall, Ilsa instructs, her voice a low command. Do not look at the ground. Let him see your face. But Annalise can barely hold her head up. The fever is a fog, her thoughts slow and disjointed. She is aware of the other women watching them, their faces a mixture of hope and terror for what this desperate act might bring. They walk out of the barrack and into the morning chill. The camp is already alive with the grim routine of survival. Women haul buckets of water, scrub floors, or stand in sullen lines for the morning's meager meal. No one makes eye contact. To draw attention is to invite trouble. Ilsa leads the way, her stride purposeful, a stark contrast to Annalise's weak, shuffling steps. Marguerite walks beside Annalise, her arm a firm support, half carrying her. The commandant's office is a small wooden hut near the main gate, set apart from the prisoner barracks. An American flag hangs limply from a pole outside. 2 guards with M1 Garand rifles stand at the door. They tense as the 3 German women approach. Ilsa speaks to them in her careful, deliberate English. We must speak with Captain Davies. It is an emergency, a medical emergency. One of the guards, a sergeant with a weary, sunburnt face, scoffs. Get back in line. You see the medic like everyone else. Ilsa does not flinch. The medic has seen her. He gave her aspirin. Look at her. Is this an aspirin sickness? She gestures to Annalise, who is now leaning heavily on Marguerite, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The sergeant's eyes flicker over Annalise's flushed, sweaty face and the dark circles under her eyes. He hesitates. He has seen this look before. He has seen it on soldiers in the field, just before they were taken to the rear, many never to return. With a grumble, he knocks on the commandant's door and disappears inside. A moment later, he emerges. The captain will give you 2 minutes. Don't waste his time. The office is small and smells of stale cigar smoke and damp wood. Captain Davies sits behind a simple field desk, a stack of papers in front of him. He is a man in his late 40s, his face etched with the deep lines of fatigue and responsibility. He does not look up as they enter. "What is this?" he asks, his voice tired and impatient. Ilsa begins to speak, her English formal and precise. She explains the situation, the spreading sickness, the lack of effective medicine, the fear that grips the barracks. She does not accuse. She simply states the facts. Captain Davies continues to look at his papers, his expression unreadable. He has heard it all before. Complaints about food, about blankets, about work. He runs a prison, not a holiday resort. He is about to dismiss them, to tell them the army provides what it can, when Annalise is seized by a violent, uncontrollable fit of coughing. It is a deep, tearing sound that fills the small office. She stumbles forward, away from Marguerite's supporting arm, her hands flying to her chest. She bends over, gasping, trying to draw a breath that will not come. The captain finally looks up, his eyes narrowing. The sound is raw, animalistic. It is the sound of a body breaking. Annalise presses a rag to her mouth, and when she pulls it away, a single, bright crimson fleck stains the white cloth. She sways, her eyes rolling back, and collapses onto the rough floorboards. Marguerite cries out and rushes to her side. The 2 guards step forward, uncertain. But it is the fleck of blood that changes the air in the room. It is no longer a complaint. It is a biological fact. Captain Davies stares at the unconscious girl on his floor, then at the small spot of blood. In the sudden, ringing silence, broken only by Annalise's shallow breathing, the captain's hardened administrative mask cracks. For a single, fleeting moment, he is not a camp commandant managing enemy prisoners. He is a man staring at death. The silence in Captain Davis's office stretched into an eternity. The 2 guards stood frozen. Ilse and Marguerite knelt beside Anneliese, her ragged breaths the only sound. The captain's gaze was fixed on the small, unconscious figure on the floor. He ran a hand over his face, the weariness of the past year settling on him like a physical weight. He had seen enough death in the Hurtgen forest to last a lifetime. He had no desire to see it here, in this drab, miserable camp, from something as preventable as pneumonia. An epidemic would be a logistical nightmare, a black mark on his record, and a threat to his own men. His decision was not born of compassion, but of cold military pragmatism. "Sergeant," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "get the medic. Tell him to bring the sulfa drugs, now." Then he looked at Ilse. "Take her to the infirmary. She will stay there." The infirmary tent was a world away from the crowded squalor of Barrack C. It was still grim, with rows of cots filled with sick and injured women, but it was cleaner, quieter. A German prisoner doctor, a thin, exhausted man named Schmidt, examined Anneliese under the watchful eye of the American medic, Corporal Miller. This time there was no language barrier, no dismissive gesture. Dr. Schmidt listened to her chest with a stethoscope, his expression growing more grave with each rasping breath. "Lobar pneumonia," he announced to the corporal in German, then translated for him. "Both lungs, advanced." Miller, looking chastened, prepared a syringe of sulfadiazine, the powerful antibacterial drug that was their best hope. The needle was thick, the injection into her hip a deep, burning pain that pierced through Anneliese's feverish haze. It was the first of many. For the next week, Anneliese drifted in and out of consciousness. Her world shrank to the confines of the cot, the canvas ceiling of the tent, and the faces that swam in and out of her vision. Dr. Schmidt, with his gentle hands, Corporal Miller, his face now showing a flicker of concern, Ilse and Marguerite, who visited every day, bringing her portions of their own meager rations. The sulfa drugs were a fire in her veins, warring with the fire in her lungs. The fever spiked and broke, leaving her drenched in sweat and utterly depleted. There were moments when she was certain she was dying, that she would become another anonymous casualty of the war, her body buried in a numbered grave in a foreign field. But slowly, imperceptibly, the battle began to turn. The coughing fits grew less violent. She could take a deep breath without a bolt of pain searing her chest. The fever receded, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep weakness. One morning, she woke up and the world was sharp and clear for the first time in weeks. The sunlight filtering through the canvas felt warm on her skin. She was alive. When Dr. Schmidt came on his rounds, he smiled for the first time. "Welcome back, Fräulein Vogel," he said softly. The cost of her cure was more than just the physical ordeal. It was the complete and utter surrender of her pride. She had survived not through strength or defiance, but because she had been brought to a state of such weakness that she had to beg. Her life had been given back to her as an act of administrative mercy by her enemy. The experience hollowed her out, replacing the last vestiges of a soldier's identity with the stark reality of a dependent, a supplicant. She was not a warrior for a cause anymore. She was simply patient 73119, a case file in a victor's bureaucracy. Her story was not unique. Across the dozens of camps scattered throughout occupied Europe, thousands of German women fought these same desperate private battles. They pleaded for insulin for their diabetes, for ointments for their festering skin infections, for anything to ease the pain of abscessed teeth or the agony of dysentery. They humbled themselves before guards, medics, and commandants, using the currency of their own suffering to bargain for the basic right to wellness. For every woman like Anneliese who was saved, countless others were not. They succumbed to tuberculosis, typhus, diphtheria, or simple untreated infections, their pleas unheard or ignored. For those who did survive, the war was not truly over. They now faced the long, uncertain journey home to a country in ruins. They would carry with them not only the memories of the front lines, but the deeper, more intimate scars of their captivity, the memory of their own fragility, and the day they were forced to beg a conqueror for the medicine that would save their life.